Welcome to the Simply Imperfect Podcast. If you're on the hunt for perfection, you may want to keep looking because we are imperfection at its finest around here. However, if you're looking to have conversations covering the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between about life, you've come to the right place. We not only embrace life's imperfections around here, we celebrate them. So for those of you who've decided to join us on this journey, go grab yourself a beverage, sit down, settle in, and let's get started. Welcome back to the Simply Imperfect Podcast. I just first wanted to apologize. I know there has been a pretty big break between this episode and the last episode, but things were a little bit crazy on our end. We went and visited my husband's family in Indiana to surprise his dad for his retirement party, which, let me tell you, was absolutely amazing. And then I recorded a podcast and I should have posted it, but I didn't post it because I watched the Harry and Meghan Markle interview and I wanted to cover it. But as I was researching some things, I found some more things that I wanted to watch and look into, and it just drug on. So now we are 2 weeks without an episode and I apologize. Before we really dig into this episode, I wanted to thank all of you guys for those who have come back and listened to more than one episode, who are liking and rating and all of that kind of stuff. You have no idea how much it means to me. Two quick things before we jump into the heart of this week's episode. First, I want to announce that the Simply Imperfect Podcast is now on YouTube. Super excited to give the podcast another platform to be able to reach more people. And YouTube is just such a popular place, and I've seen other podcasts make the jump, and I just felt that it was an awesome next step for this podcast. I also want to announce that I am developing a Patreon for the podcast, and I would like your guys' input on what are things and the different tiers that you would like to help support the podcast. Right now, the Patreon is active. There is a general support option, but I want to very much so make it special for you guys. So what are the things that you want to see? Live question and answers? Do you want to do live chats, special episodes, access to the a newsletter? What kind of things would you like for the different Patreon support levels? I am open for all of your suggestions, and I will also put the link to the Patreon in the show notes. Okay, now let's get into the episode. So last Sunday, March 7th, CBS aired a primetime special with Oprah doing an interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Now, to say people were interested in this is probably an understatement. According to a Dateline article, it looks like 17.8 million viewers. That is the most primetime audience for any entertainment special during the current 2020 to 2021 season. It's kind of crazy to think about. However, with how much of an interest the public seems to have with the royals and the American who married into the royals family, it doesn't really surprise me. And this interview comes on the heels of some big announcements from the royal family and Meghan and Harry about their roles going forward with the royal family. So before we dive into all of that, this probably won't surprise any of you guys. Let's back up and go over a quick timeline of Meghan and Harry. So it sounds like Meghan had some pretty awesome friends, and in July of 2016, she went on a blind date, and that blind date was with Prince Harry. I've got some awesome friends, and I absolutely adore my husband, but let me tell you that I feel like my friends fell below the marker because I never got set up with a prince. So, just saying. You guys, let's do better. So getting back to it, in November of 2016, there was the official press release that they were an item. And then on November 27, 2017, the engagement was announced. They were married on May 18th, 2018. Then in October 15 of 2018, they announced their pregnancy, with who would end up being little Archie, who was born on May 6, 2019. And then we're going to jump ahead a little bit. And in January of 2020, January 8th, they actually announced that they were going to step back as working members of the royal family. And then by July of 2020, they were actually moving to Santa Barbara. And in between that, they moved and were staying in a friend's house in Canada for a while. So the end of 2020 was really busy for them. They had a couple really big announcements. They announced in September of 2020 a Netflix deal. I'm not sure on the date of this one, but they also announced a Spotify deal. And then in November, it was announced that Meghan had suffered a miscarriage. She actually wrote an article about it. In February of 2020, on the anniversary, actually, of Harry's mother announcing she was pregnant with Harry, Meghan and Harry announced that they were pregnant with their second child. And then on February 18th, 2021, it was announced that they were officially stepping away from their royal duties. At the same time, it was announced that the Queen had stripped the Duke and Duchess of any royal patronages that she gave them, along with Harry's honorary military titles. Wow, that's a lot, right? And the crazy thing to think about this is when we are sitting here watching what's going on, it seems overwhelming. But it's also hard to remember that not only are the royals a family, but it's also a business. They're are jobs, working members of the royal family. They obtain a paycheck. They have job responsibilities. But then there's also the added family dynamic in all of this. Okay, so on to the actual interview with Oprah. Let's just say I wasn't overly impressed. I don't want to say unimpressed with Oprah, but it seemed like I felt like the interview could be conducted better. It was too much just friends talking and less interviewing, and I feel like there were quite a few spots where Oprah wanted to get to a specific point, and so she cut off trains of thought that I believe a lot of the unanswered questions probably could have been answered if she just let both Meghan and Harry just finish their thoughts. The other thing I noticed, and this was right away when Meghan walked out and said hi to Oprah, I didn't realize exactly how pregnant Meghan was. I don't know why, but I did not anticipate a bump. And boy, does she have a bump, which is absolutely adorable. A pregnant woman is the cutest thing ever. So they start the interview in a very logical spot, like day one, like the wedding, the start of their marriage. And can I tell you how surprised and in the end, happy for Meghan and Harry when I found out that a couple days before the big televised, that Meghan and Harry got married, just the two of them, nobody else, no big pomp and circumstance, just the two of them. And she talked about in that moment, they were able to exchange the vows that they wanted, that the vows hanging up in their bedroom are those vows. It was about just the two of them, because even though a wedding ceremony is about the bride and groom, when you have a big ceremony like one of the Prince of England getting married, the bride and groom are almost lost in it because it's more about the show and the pomp and the circumstance and the tradition. And I still to this day say the most amazing picture from that day, and I will see if I can find it and link it in the show notes. It was taken after the wedding when they left the church, and it was an aerial photo looking down in the carriage. And so it was like the tops of their heads, and you can see like their laps, and they were holding hands. And just to me, it was such a sweet picture that if I was Meghan, I would have that hanging in my house because it was so beautiful. So I got ahead of myself just a little bit. I skipped the actual beginning of the episode. They talk a little bit about melding into the family and being part of the family and meeting the Queen for the first time. And Meghan talks about something that I think is a real red flag for what was potentially going to happen with her and the royal family. So she talks about how they were on their way to have lunch at one of the palace grounds. It sounded like it was like with Fergie and Beatrice, and I thought her name was Eugene, but I guess it's Eugenie anyways. And they ended up finding out that the Queen was going to be there. She had never met the Queen, and Prince Harry said to her, "Do you know how to curtsy?" And by the way, if my husband looked at me and was like, "Do you know how to curtsy?" I would laugh at him because Do you? As you're sitting here listening to this podcast, could you curtsy? Because Lord knows I couldn't. And that they stood outside by the car practicing to curtsy because she didn't realize that that pomp and circumstance wasn't just a show. That even in private, you still curtsied. She talks about looking to Harry and saying, "But it's your grandmother." And he looked back at her and was like, "No, she's the queen." Could you imagine having that extra level of formality with your grandmother because she is the queen? I couldn't imagine. That would be something that would be a whole new realm to understand. And I think at that moment, for any normal person, you would be like, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" And this is where I have a little bit of a hard time believing what Meghan said, because she talks about how she didn't do any research about the royal family. Now, I know my mom was a big into documentaries and biographies and all that kind of stuff. So we watched a lot of things. I remember watching Princess Diana's funeral. And so I'm not saying everybody is as aware of some things as we were raised, but I think you would have to be aware enough of some things, especially, I believe, Meghan and Harry are just a little bit older than I am. So to say she had no idea about the royal family, I think is a bit of a stretch. And to also say that when you are entering a family, a notable family like that you did no research, you didn't look into what life would be like, especially when you are marrying the son of Princess Diana, who experienced so much turmoil after she married Charles. You know, it's been something that the whole world has talked about, how the paparazzi hounded her and the stuff that she went through. And as you watch this interview with Meghan, it sounds like a lot of the stuff she went through and the negative publicity and the backlash that she dealt with the media is very similar to a lot of the experiences Diana had. It also sounds like that Harry and the royal family did Meghan a massive disservice. Because if we're going to take everything Meghan said at face value, which I don't know if I do, I don't believe she lied all through the interview, but I think we all view things a little differently when we're in a situation. You know, there's always the phrase, like, there's your side, my side, and the truth, and somewhere in the middle of your side and my side is the truth, and it's what really happened, but we all of our memory and all of our experience is a little bit skewed. But I don't understand why, especially when you were taking an American and bringing them into this royal family, and she has no idea how things functioned. I mean, for me, if I was Harry and the interaction about the curtsying happened, or anybody else in the family who witnessed it, it would have been like, okay, it's time to take you aside. Like, let's teach you the British national anthem. Let's talk about formalities. Let's talk about how things are done, so that way your transition into this and a senior working member of the royal family is a little bit smooth. And it shows me that even if a fraction of what Meghan said throughout this entire interview is true, that the royal family learned nothing with what happened with Diana. And now I don't know, Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and then Prince Harry and Meghan both had very short courtships. They met, they were engaged, and they were married all fairly quickly. That maybe that's what played a role in this, where Kate had many years of dating William. They even separated for a while before they got back together and got married, and she dealt with a lot of this over time, that maybe there was a bit more of an intro because she had the extra time. And let's face it, being British versus American, there is a bit of understanding on how the Brits do things versus how we do things that is definitely an advantage. So Meghan talks about the very infamous article that came out. She said it was about 6 or 7 months after the wedding, and it was talking about how Meghan made Kate cry. I guess there was an article about 6 or 7 months after the wedding where the press released information about an alleged argument between Kate and Meghan, and it was over the flower girl dresses, and in the end it made Kate cry. And I really think this was the beginning where you really got to see whose side of things the press was really going to come out on. And don't get me wrong, Kate has had her fair share of bad media as well, but I think over the years, it's become a little bit more favorable. I don't know if I've seen positive, especially British articles that have been favorable towards Meghan. But Meghan goes in and talks about how it was actually the reverse. And the sad thing is, Meghan and her had resolved it. Meghan had sent her flowers with a really nice card and had apologized, and they had moved on. But now this was one of the light bulb moments because Meghan talked about how she felt that the royal family would go on record clarifying some of the most inconsequential things, but they wouldn't go on the record and set this straight. She said they would go out of their way to tell a lie to protect a member of the family, but they wouldn't even go out and set the record straight on the truth. And she said this was really the eye-opening experience where it was like, okay, they really aren't protecting me. You know, I had been told all this time that if I just said no comment to everything, that I led, a quiet life when it came to the media, that they would protect me. And this was a moment that I realized they're not going to. They're not going to protect me, and they're not protecting my husband. She talks about the firm or the institution, and I remember watching it going, what the heck are they talking about? So I did a little bit of research, and it sounds like the firm or the institution is the people working to keep the royal family's reputation strong. And it also noted that people that are part of the firm, when people reference the firm, are both members and non-members of the family. She talks about people who witnessed or were privy to the information about the fight between Meghan and Kate going to the firm and wanting to set the record straight and them shutting them down. Which to me, if true, shows that the firm really wanted a specific picture painted of Meghan and Kate. The one thing that I also thought was interesting, because it can go two ways. Meghan refused to give the details about her fight with Kate, and it can go one of two ways for me. One, totally respectable, because she doesn't want, there's no point in drudging up the details of this incident that has been resolved. Or two, if you refuse to talk about it, it's less lies that you have to keep track of in your head about what did you say that actually happened. If the truth truly is that Meghan made Kate cry and she's just trying to make herself look better. And ultimately, since we'll never hear Kate's side of it, or I doubt we'll hear Kate's side of it, we won't ever really know. That's the thing about situations like this is all we can do is really look at what's presented and see if we can nestle somewhere in the middle of all of it to find the truth. Because as touched by Oprah and Meghan is you can even see in the articles about Meghan and Kate how differently they're painted. And I found an article that compared a lot of these news articles. And the one that was specifically talked about, there were two instances that were specifically talked about between Meghan and Oprah. One being about how when they touched their pregnant bellies, about how it seemed like a sweet thing when Meghan did it, but it was a vain thing when Meghan did it. Or Kate ate avocado toast because she found it helped her morning sickness, and Meghan ate avocado toast and it was helped supporting rainforest deforestation. Meghan's response to this was pretty priceless. She says, well, that's one loaded piece of toast. The problem I have is you cannot hold people to two different types of standards. If it's okay for one to eat avocado toast and to hold her pregnant baby bump, it is okay for the other. End of story. The next section of the interview before Harry came out and joined was pretty heavy. And I have to say, this section seemed weird to me because I didn't necessarily want to believe it, because the things that were covered were especially heavy. And these are things between family members. And that's hard to listen to. But at the same token, I find it hard to believe that someone would go on the record about their family member claiming that members of their family said and did some awful things. And to be honest, I don't know where I fall on a lot of this. One of the things I did that delayed me coming out with this podcast was I watched a couple episodes on YouTube with a body language analysis. They watch the interview and they talk about some of the things that are usually giveaways, things that aren't big deal. I will link it in the show notes. And I think to me, it was pretty eye-opening. But at the same time, you've got Meghan, who's an actress. She's a trained actress. And Harry, who you can't tell me didn't have any kind of public speaking training that they would be able to portray whatever it is they wanted to get across. Ultimately, I think everybody who watches this might come away with a different understanding and perspective of it, but here's mine. So the one thing that I thought was interesting is both in Meghan's interview and then when Harry comes out and interviews with Meghan is that they both talk about how wonderful the Queen is. And she talks about how welcoming the Queen always was. Harry talks about how he talks to his grandma often, that he talked to his father several times, but then he stopped taking his phone calls. And the only person that they really specifically talk about being wonderful was his grandmother. And now I don't know is that because she's the Queen and they don't want to talk negatively on the Queen, or is it because she's truly wonderful? And I'm hesitant to believe that they wouldn't speak, if she wasn't wonderful, as they talked about, that they wouldn't just lay it all out there, because some of the stuff they talk about, they lay all out there anyways. So why not be honest? He'll admit that his father stopped taking his phone calls and that his relationship with his brother is pretty distant right now. So he's honest about those things, but not the other things. So the things that seemed to really push Harry and Meghan over the edge was the fact of security. And while she was pregnant with Archie, she found out two things. One, that Archie wasn't going to have a title. And two, that because he didn't have a title, he wouldn't have security. And then there was this extra layer that she was also hearing at the same time, that there were some questions by a family member about how dark Archie's skin would be, which even saying those words makes me absolutely so uncomfortable, because when it comes down to it, that baby, it doesn't matter what color his skin is. And I can't wait until we live in a world where questions like that aren't so outside the realm of possibilities that when you hear that, there isn't even a chance that someone would say that. It's just disgusting. And the thing is, it's disgusting no matter what. Because either somebody actually said that or they're lying about it. And either way, it's awful because they are using race as a weapon. Either way. So stepping back just a little bit, when it comes to titles, I did a little bit of research about it and I will link what I found in the show notes. And Meghan briefly talks about it, but gets cut off by Oprah. And I wish, this is one of those moments where I wish Oprah had just let her talk, because I think her thought process was cut off. Meghan talks about a convention of Queen George IV or the Fifth, and about how they were going to change that for Archie. And that is all that she got out. So what I was able to find is King George V wrote a letter in 1917, and it said that great-grandchildren would not automatically become prince or princesses except for the children of the oldest child of the Prince of Wales. So the Prince of Wales is Prince Charles. His oldest child is William. So his eldest would be automatically a prince or a princess. And then in November of 2012, the Queen came out and issued a letter saying that all of William's children would automatically be prince or princess. So by the standards set by that, Archie would not automatically be a prince. He would become a prince when his grandfather, Charles, becomes king. If for some reason it goes from Queen Elizabeth to William being king, Archie would never become a prince. And this is where I wish Oprah would have let Meghan finish her thought, because it's a little bit confusing here. When I was watching the interview and she talks about the convention of George V and that they were talking about changing it for Archie, she left me with the impression that they changed the convention, that Archie should have been prince, but they changed the convention for Archie, making it so that he couldn't be prince. However, after watching the interview and doing a little bit of research, I think what she was trying to say was that there were talks about changing it to allow for Archie to become a prince. Either way, that's not what happened. And what was relayed to her from Harry is because he didn't have a title, he didn't get security, which I agree with Meghan at this point is concerning, because the royal family, the firm, all of that is involved in this machine of clickbait and articles and interacting with the press, even to the point that she talks about that the palace hosts some of the tabloids' Christmas parties. I mean, they're in bed together. Like, let's not beat around the bush. So the family, the firm, is involved in creating this big machine that makes it so that there is a security risk, and whether or not there is this extra level of security concern because of her race. And now they've created all this, but now they're not going to protect her child. And there's this moment that I think Oprah thought was going to be a gotcha moment, where she talks about how Harry and Meghan didn't participate in the tradition of the pictures after she gave birth on the hospital, the steps of the hospital. And Meghan fires back, and I agree with her. She talks about how it's not tradition because Archie wasn't a prince. That is only a tradition when it is a prince or a princess. And I get it. If what Meghan is saying is true, which I understand that there's a chance that it isn't, but if what she is saying is true, and it's like, we've created this big media storm around you, but we're not going to make sure your child is protected. Would you want to go out there and stand on the steps and look pretty and take all the pictures with your child that is now feeding into this media storm, making it worse, but there's nobody to protect that child from what you are now fueling into? But I do see the other side. There is extra fuel, different fuel being fed to the fire of the media storm because she didn't do the picture. And that in itself became another round of news about how awful Meghan was. And then Oprah asked a question about, was Archie not made a prince because of the color of his skin? And I remember holding my breath, because to me, this is bigger than the news and the interview, because Archie is a person who now there's this interview out there, and who knows what is said behind closed doors, but this is a family. These are this child's family members that now there's this article out there, this interview out there that is talking about whether or not his family accepts him because of the color of his skin. And that is not something anybody should deal with, whether it's a lie being told for media coverage or it's the truth. If it's the truth, this child now is going to look at his family and go, do you love and accept me? And no child should have to wonder that. And then it got even darker, because Meghan talks about how she reached a point in her mental space while she was pregnant with Archie that she no longer wanted to live, that she had suicidal thoughts, that she didn't want to be left alone because she was concerned what she would do to herself. And while you're sitting there looking at the tabloids and what was being said about her publicly, and the fact that this family that she married into wasn't, in her opinion, doing anything to protect her, And now she is claiming she knew that her child wouldn't have protection and that there were some people in the family who were expressing concerns about his skin tone. I could see that all being so much to bear. So much to bear. And what was absolutely mind-boggling to me is that when Harry and Meghan expressed their need for help, nobody would allow her to get it because of how that would look. How that would look. You have somebody who's telling you they are concerned to be left alone because of what they might do to themselves, and you are afraid of what it will look like if they go and get help. That is wrong in so many ways I can't even count. And it was another moment where I was like, obviously the royal family and this frickin' firm learned nothing from Princess Diana. From everything this family and Harry and his brother went through when his mom passed and all of the crap that they put his mom through. And it's just disgusting. And like I said, I understand that there is a chance that all of this is not true or skewed fragments of truth. But I have to say it again, I have a hard time believing that someone would wage these kinds of accusations against not only family members, but important and powerful people. And the thing that surprised me was when Oprah was like, why didn't you just get yourself help? And Meghan was like, well, I couldn't exactly call an Uber. And she talks about how when she packed up all of her stuff and she moved to England and they announced their engagement, that at that time she turned over her keys, her passport, her ID, like all of those things. From the time she moved to England, the first time she saw them was when they moved to Canada. Could you imagine marrying into a family and not having your own identification? In the big machine that is this royal family, you really have no ability to make your own decisions, is what's being portrayed. You have no ability to do what you want your way and what you need to do for yourself. And I can understand if that machine runs like why, when they were running into these issues, that Harry and Meghan would go, we need to step back from the machine. And as they talked about what stepping back for them looked like, it sounds to me like they never intended a full exit. They both talked about how this is a thing that exists, that there are other members of the family who do this, who aren't full-time front and center, but that are a little bit more behind the scenes. They come to support the Queen when called upon. At least to me, I was left with the impression that they were trying to find a sweet spot between what they were able to offer to the crown and what the crown was able to offer them. And yeah, it is a go-to ways, because they are, when you are a full-time working member of the royal family, you are giving your entire life to working and supporting the crown. And so you should get something in return. And I understand if you are somebody who is looking at being completely restricted and controlled to the point that your wife cannot get help when she is having a mental health struggle, I understand saying, hey, this isn't working for us. We have to take a step back, find something that is in the middle of what we have and what we need that works for both of us. And let's be honest, if you're somebody who needs a change, staying in the backyard of the person who is controlling your every move isn't always going to be the idea. And staying anywhere in England is really the Queen's backyard. So moving to somewhere inside the Commonwealth, to me, after they were talking, it was like, oh, it makes sense. You were trying to give distance. You were trying to allow the change to happen and to figure out what this looks like. But then it sounds like after they moved, things really started to move quickly. And that's when the crown announced that they were removing Harry's security, that they disowned him, that the first part of March 2020, they announced that they were no longer supporting him. And to me, if if I was like, this isn't working for me, let's find some happy medium, and the response was, well, that's fine. We're removing any support we're offering to you, and we're removing your security. To me, I'd give them the middle finger too. If you're not willing to reimburse me for my time, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to spend my time supporting you when it consumes my entire life. That to me isn't a crazy jump. Now, as I've said throughout this entire podcast, I understand that there could be another side of this that we're not seeing. And let's be honest, we'll never see it because it's not like the Queen's going to sit down for a tell-all interview. And Harry talks about it a couple times that he was watching what he felt like was history repeating itself. Could you imagine how terrifying this would be to be Harry? You've watched your mom. I mean, you watched your mom go through what your mom went through and then losing her. And then you have your wife, the mother of your child, struggling, going through some very similar things in the press. And your only option is to step back to protect her and get her help. And the thing is, the family and the business is so intertwined that it's hard to I could see it. It's hard to step back from the business without the family being like, but we're family and this is the family business and it's what we'll do. And I don't think it surprises anybody if you've watched the history of the Queen and the things that she's done, that she's, in my opinion, put the crown ahead of the family in almost every circumstance. At least that's my impression. And the fact that him stepping back, she wouldn't necessarily support it. She do what's best for you, but there are repercussions on the business end of this. Harry talks about it being difficult because he was watching members of Parliament come out against the racial tone of the articles that were coming out against Meghan, but that his family was silent. And to him, that was huge and almost the nail in the coffin of, if I obviously am not going to have the support of my family and I need to take the protection of my family, my wife, my son into my own hands. And they both talk about how when the Crown announced that they were removing Harry's security, it was also right after, I believe they said it was the Star had published their exact location in Canada. So he knew he wasn't safe in Canada. It was right before all of the lockdowns happened. He knew the borders would close and he wasn't sure how he could protect his family. And that is how they ended up in Santa Barbara. They were in I believe they said Tyler Perry's house. He offered them security and it was like the safe haven for a little while to figure out what they were going to do. And that if it wasn't for his inheritance from his mother, that he wouldn't be able to do this. Now, I didn't think about this at the time, but now while I'm running through this all at the same time, do you know what it sounds like to me? And let me know if you guys think if I'm off. But to me, it sounds like purse strings were being used as a way to control. We're going to remove your security. We're disowning you. We're not going to fund you. We're not going to pay you. You're on your own. And to me, it sounds like, okay, good luck. You're either on your own or you come back and you're a full working member of the family. And they attempt to play chicken. And instead of playing chicken, Harry and Meghan went, here's our middle fingers. We'll figure it out on our own. It sounds like a parent flexing and trying to get their kid to do what they wanted, and it didn't work. What do you guys think? Am I really, really off base on that thought process? It seems to me that like every step of the way, that every decision that Harry and Meghan make from the very first decision, that it was like, okay, for our mental health, we have to step back. And the family has just been reacting to every single thing. And it's like a one-up. Well, fine, if that's what you're going to do, this is what we're going to do. And then Meghan and Harry are like, well, if that's what you're going to do, this is what we're going to do. And it's this game of chicken to figure out who backs off first. And at this point, it seems to me like all ties are cut because Meghan and Harry are receiving no support from the Crown. Harry's honorary military titles have been removed. There are no plans for them to ever return as full-time working members of the royal family. And now they are established. They own a home in the United States. Now, the great-grandson of the Queen of England is going to be raised in California. I don't know if anybody's really winning. And I know there's these big conspiracies out there that this was Meghan's entire plan this entire time. But A, how could she plan that from day one when she started dating him? And B, you would think you would be better off to be in the good graces of the royal family versus where she is now. Because if what these people are saying is correct and what she truly wanted was fame and notoriety and the titles and everything, leaving the royal family and almost becoming right now an enemy of the royal family seems to be pretty counterproductive to that. And to be honest, at the very end when Harry comes out and he's talking about that he's heartbroken, that he feels let down, that he feels betrayed by his father because his father's been through something similar and that there is a lot of hurt to come through, you're really just watching a son who was like, I needed the help of my family. I needed the help of my father to help save my family. I needed their help to ensure that my children and my wife were taken care of. And I'm not going to lie, I don't understand how, if I was in Harry's shoes, how uncomfortable my father's relationship with Camilla would make me. And maybe this is me just being petty, but I would look at that woman and go, you played a role in the demise of my parents' relationship. And I don't know how someone gets past that, but that's just a side note. And maybe that's some of the hurt Harry is talking about. But then they wrap up the end of the whole interview and Oprah asks Harry some version of, what is the favorite thing about your life here? And everything he mentions are truly the simple joys of life. He talks about going to the beach with his family and taking Archie on a bike ride and how he gets to listen to him chatter in the back. And your heart just warms because the look on his face makes you at least believe, because there's this like complete light and happiness that he's portraying. So it makes you believe that he seems to have found a sweet spot in life, that he seems to have settled into a good routine and a good life that he is building with Meghan in California. And the sad thing is to think about the amount of turmoil they are portraying they have gone through to get to this point. And what makes me sad for them is it seems they have found this true serenity, but it seems to have come at the cost of his family. And on the same note, we know it's been pretty public that she has had a pretty bumpy relationship with her family, and so I think in all of it, you just hope that they, at the end of the day, both sides are able to look at the bigger picture beyond the business of the royal family and remember that they're family. And at the end of the day, they're family, and that is the thing that matters. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Simply Imperfect Podcast. If you've enjoyed and don't want to miss an episode, make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help the podcast out, make sure to leave us a rating and review while you're at it. To keep up to date with all things Simply Imperfect and to join our mailing list, head on over to @simply.imperfect on Instagram. And until next time, folks, make sure to embrace this simple imperfection that we call life.